Hey YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. This is a malt liquor video. As you can see, I'm about a halfway down. Cooper's number 3 for the day, though it be not yet 3 o'clock. This would be because today's Saturday. On Tuesday, I was monitoring my field of batteries being manually charge controlled so that when I get around to it, they can go into the tower of Power's pyramid of electricities. And it seems that as I bent over to prong the terminals of one of the batteries with my multimeter's probes, I was standing with my legs more or less straight and bending over, and I attempted to lean to one side so I could have a look at the multimeter, and I did something horrible to my back. This is the same back that, if it doesn't get pandered to, it protests deeply, wildly, horribly, to the point where I've actually been eating codeine and paracetamol since Thursday. Today I have not had any paracetamol because I am sort of forcing myself not to use too much of that shit. Paracetamol's bad for your liver, and codeine's about to become very difficult to get without a doctor's prescription, and I don't like going to doctors. So therefore, thus and because, I've been sitting monitoring the batteries and listening to ABC Radio National, as usual. I was actually reading a very interesting article about de Havilland mosquitoes in January 2017's Sea-Mail Aeroplane Monthly, when more or less all of a sudden the radio brought up the subject of Tronald J. Dump. It really is getting to be difficult to escape thinking about that particular individual, Tronald J. Dump. The comb-over that stalks the earth, the inspiration for the age of the Trumpleton. Just like an ordinary simpleton, but a Trumpleton embraces a complete, utter contempt and disdain for facts and evidence and scientific methods and ideas of proof, while rapturously embracing the idea of venting one's ignorant, hubristic, arrogant prejudices. So we're in the age of the Trumpleton. And I am currently prophesying the Enabling Act in the excited states, or the analogy of the Enabling Act. Now, those of us who've studied 20th century politics and history will be aware that Adolf Hitler was elected, unlike George W. Bush, Adolf Hitler was in fact elected. George Bush had his father's Supreme Court stop the counting because continued counting of the votes may prejudice the claimant's, the applicant's claim to have won the election. So the inauguration went ahead, and then 6 months later they finished counting the votes and they found that Al Gore was elected president. Yeah, but George W. got 8 years at the levers of power in command of the excited states. And the world sort of more or less went to hell in a handbasket. His cronies counselled in favour of establishing a forever war, a war against terror, asymmetric warfare, a battle tactic that is so bloody effective that the reason people say that Israel is a terrorist state is that two of Israel's prime ministers were arrested, charged, tried, convicted, and imprisoned by the British administration in the British mandated territory of Palestine in 1946 and 47. That would be Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres. They were arrested because they were in the habit of wearing women's dresses, wigs, and makeup while throwing hand grenades into coffee shops and then using British supplied Sten guns given to them during World War II to fight the Germans with, using British Sten guns to then machine gun these stunned survivors of the hand grenade attacks in the coffee shops in the British mandated state of Palestine in 1946-47. This is why people say that Israel is fundamentally, was, and always will be a terrorist state. It's why people say that Zionism is not Zionism in a slightly repainted guise. So, why is this video titled Trump's Enabling Act? It's because since Trump has come to power, he has demonstrated that he's not quite a Nazi. He's more of a fascist. Now, a working definition, a rule of thumb. You know what a rule of thumb is? A rule of thumb is the British statute law, which used to state until 1936, when it was abolished at the same time they made it no longer unlawful for a Christian to marry a Jew. The rule of thumb said that a man was entitled to beat his wife with a wooden stick as long as it was no thicker than his thumb. So the rule of thumb for defining a fascist is anybody who truly believes, honestly, self-righteously, hubristically, self-centeredly, who honestly believes in their little heart of hearts, their soul, that anybody who disagrees with them deserves to go to jail, to be imprisoned for their disagreeableness. That's what a fascist is. Benito Mussolini was the first fascist to ever come to power of a national entity, Italy, in 1926. In 1945, he was hung with piano wire from a lamppost by the people that he purported to lead. How long it's going to take Ronald J. Dump to meet the same fate, that's a matter of conjecture. Rugby, but label out malt liquor. My honest impression is that the sum total, the aggregate effect of the presidential proclamations which Ronald J. Dump has publicly announced, the aggregate effect is to increase the amount of civil angst with against his rule. He set the National Guard against illegal immigrants. He set the state police and local police to the task of enforcing a federal decree that anybody who looks as if they may be an immigrant should be stopped on the basis of racial profiling and examined, interrogated, have their papers looked at. From the moment of his inauguration, i.e. being screwed into place, like go and look in a dictionary, find out what an augur does, A-U-G-U-R, augur. He was inaugurated. He was screwed into place. From the time he was screwed into place for the next 4 years, unless he either dies in office, like maybe his intestines will rise up and strangle his brain, the logical conclusion of bowel cancer from eating so much meat, and he is a big meat eater, Trump steaks. Or, of course, maybe the ghost of Lee Harvey Oswald might, rise up and strike again. But failing that, if Ronald J. Dump is in there for the next 4 or 8 years, my impression of the concerted effect of everything that he's signed to date is that he is attempting to increase the level of civil disobedience, public disapproval of his regime, in order to magnify the size of the protests. And his idea is probably going to be that as soon, that was one of the things that he signed a decree prioritising police action on a federal, local, and state level against drug traffickers. So, sayonara to the marijuana industry in the excited states, people smugglers, and anybody who's violent towards cops. So he's stirring up reasons for people to want to protest. He's going to have a big police presence trying to kettle the protests. America is a land with very, very lax gun laws and very, very high interpersonal firearm violence rates. My suspicion is that at some point, a concealed sniper working for the administration is going to fire into a protesting crowd with the deliberate aim of inciting someone in the crowd to assume that the police have been shooting into the protesters, and then all of the people who are in the crowd with concealed weapons will pull them out and discharge them in the general direction of the police, which will then cause the extremely militarized US police to start shooting into the crowd. And before you know it, he's going to have a literal revolution on his hands, and that gives him the excuse to declare martial law. Therefore, the title of this video, Trump's Enabling Act. Everything that he's done for the past 5-6 weeks has been aimed towards increasing the level of protest, dissent, civil disobedience inside the excited states of Norte Armed Americano. As silly as it seems from the outside looking in, I think he really believes everything he says. I think he is supremely ignorant, as well as supremely arrogant, supremely hubristic, and narcissistic. He has a sociopathy masquerading as a personality. And because he was lucky enough to be born into a multi-millionaire's household, he's 74 years old and he's never met reality yet. From the moment he announced his candidacy to stand for election for president of the excited states of Norte Armed Americano, I was pretty sure he was going to beat Hillary Clinton if that's who the Democrats chose to stand against him. For the simple reason that he epitomizes the secret desires of probably 50 to 60% of muddled America, spelt with a capital K in the middle of the word. They have a Disney-fied view of history. They don't really underconstumble how the world came to be the way it is, but they have a third generation ingrained traditional belief that America deserves to rule and police the world, that America deserves to have the highest standard of living in the world, and that anybody who disagrees is an enemy of the people. They've never read George Orwell's 1984. They've never read Animal Farm. They don't know jack shit about the technical realities of history. They just believe in America's exceptionalism and Pax Americana and their right to wipe out anybody who disagrees. And as far as I can figure out, Tronald J. Dump is right now waiting for the protests to escalate to the point where a sniper can fire into the protesters can shoot back, in air quotes, at the police, and then a state of emergency can be declared, the excited states placed under martial law, and that's it. There's not going to be another election. It took 19 years before the population rose up and hung Mussolini from a lamppost. Tronald J. Dump, he's not going to last that long. He's 74 years old. But you know what? He has some very ambitious family members. Uncle Spam just became a medieval fiefdom. Ciao.